Can you imagine spending centuries behind bars? The annals of justice are filled with stories of extraordinary sentences, some stretching beyond the span of several human lifetimes. Today, we delve into the top 10 people who outlived, or are outliving, some of the most insane prison sentences ever handed down. Starting at number 10 is a case from the early 20th century. In 1912, Charles Scott was sentenced to 100 years in prison for a series of burglaries. Miraculously, Scott lived to see his release, walking free at the age of 109 after serving 97 years. His life, spanning 3 centuries, is a testament to human resilience. Moving to number 9, we find Jeanne, a French serial killer from the early 1900s. After being convicted for the murder of 10 children, including her own, Weber was sentenced to life in an asylum. She outlived her sentence in a way, by taking her own life just 10 years after her confinement. Number 8 on our list brings us to the modern era, with the case of Anderson Lee Aldrich. After a horrific mass shooting at Club Q in Colorado Springs in 2022, Aldrich was sentenced to more than 2,000 years in prison, including 5 consecutive life sentences without parole. This sentence is among the longest ever recorded, and Aldrich is set to spend multiple lifetimes behind bars. At 7, we recount the tale of Paul Geidel, who in 1910, at the age of 17, was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years to life. Geidel was finally released in 1980 after serving 68 years and 245 days in prison, the longest term ever served by an American prisoner at that time. Number 6 introduces us to Johnson Van Dyke Grigsby, who, after a minor altercation turned fatal in 1908, was sentenced to life in prison. Grigsby was released in 1974 after serving 66 years and 354 days. He lived freely for another 5 years before passing away at the age of 93. As we reach the halfway point, number 5 spotlights Ian Manuel, who at the age of 13 received a life sentence for non-homicidal offences. Due to reforms in juvenile sentencing, Manuel was released in 2016 after serving 26 years, during which he taught himself law and fought for his release. Number 4 is the story of Oreste Fulminante, sentenced in the late 20th century to life without the possibility of parole for a murder he claimed he didn't commit. After decades in prison, emerging evidence and legal battles proved his innocence, leading to his release after 43 years. Approaching the top 3, we find the case of Joe Arridy, awarded a posthumous pardon after being wrongfully convicted of murder and rape in the 1930s. Diagnosed with severe mental disabilities, Arridy spent years on death row before his execution in 1939, a haunting reminder of justice gone awry. Scene script number 2 is the heart-wrenching story of Clarence Moses E.L., who was wrongfully convicted in 1987 based on flawed evidence and dream testimony. After spending 28 years in prison, Moses E.L. was exonerated and released following new DNA testing and a confession from the real perpetrator. Finally, at number 1, we have the extraordinary case of Lawrence McKinney. Initially sentenced in 1978 for a rape and burglary he did not commit, McKinney spent 31 years in prison before DNA evidence exonerated him in 2009. After a lengthy legal battle, he was fully exonerated and received compensation for the years lost. These stories, while extraordinary, highlight the complexities and sometimes the fallibility of the criminal justice system. They remind us of the human capacity for endurance and the relentless pursuit of truth and justice. Each case, from those who lived through their sentences to those who regained their freedom through exoneration, tells a unique story of survival against incredible odds.